I believe what happened though is I dozed off at the wheel. I think I just nodded off and I swerved to the right and I overcorrected to the left and I lost control of the car. And the car began to roll, not off the road, but down the road at about 75 miles per hour. I'm not sure what that is in the metric system, but it's fast. It was a high speed rollover. And I blacked out for most of the crash. But when the car came to a stop, I was very conscious, very alert. The first thing I heard was my 7-year-old son, my oldest son, crying hysterically in the back seat. And, as a father, I thought, I got to get to my boy. I've got to get to my boy. And that's when I realized that I could not move. I was pinned. I was struggling to breathe. There was the rancid smell of gasoline and all the glass, the broken glass. I had no idea of my injuries. What had actually happened is both of my legs had been crushed. My left leg was shortly after the accident amputated above the knee. My back had been damaged and broken in 2 places. Ironically, not damaging the spinal column, just the vertebrae were cracked. My rib cage was damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My right arm was nearly pulled all the way off. And then the seatbelt had cut through and ruptured all my insides. I was unaware of all of that. I knew I was in pain. I knew I was struggling to breathe. I was fighting for consciousness. But all I knew was my son was crying, and that's when I realized that no one else was crying. And I knew at the scene, I knew in that moment that my wife was gone. She was killed instantly in the accident. And my youngest son, Griffin, who was just a toddler at the time, he was in a car seat. I was aware enough to realize the car seat had broken apart and he'd been ejected from the car. And my whole soul just cried out, oh, where's my boy? Where's my little boy? And I knew there was a knowing that he was gone too. And true enough, both my wife and youngest son were killed instantly in the car crash. I had extensive injuries. My 7-year-old was banged up pretty good, but he was crying in the back seat and I couldn't get to him. I mean, Chris, it's the darkest hell a man could ever be in. Now, I've not seen or done the things you've done, my friend. I don't know war. I don't know any of that, but I know death and despair and carnage, and here I was in the middle of it, and that was pretty dark. I felt helpless. In fact, I wanted those 3 seconds back. Like, what happened? Can't I turn back 3 seconds? And I began to lose consciousness. And that's when a very strange thing happened. I felt light come. It's like light. It's like light rushed to me. Light surrounded me. It's almost as if this light was tangible and was comforting me in this most catastrophic moment of my life. And it felt as if I was being delivered, like I was being raised above the accident scene in this light. And I was a little bit confused, like, what's happening? But then I realized, oh, I can breathe. I'm not in pain. And I was questioning, how can I possibly be okay? And I believe what happened is my soul or my spirit, whatever you want to call it, my consciousness, I had left my body. And here I was in this light. And the reason I say that is I was in this light wondering, how can I be okay? What's going on? Suddenly my wife, who I knew was deceased at the scene, and I don't share this to be morbid or graphic, but she was sleeping. She had reclined her seat back and was sleeping at the time of the accident. And so the seatbelt did not restrain her properly. And because of that, she had suffered head trauma. That's what took her life. And I was aware of that at the scene of the accident. But here in this light, she was gorgeous. She was radiant. She was beautiful. And yet she was emphatic. She kept saying, you can't be here. You can't stay. And the odd thing, I say, my soul, my consciousness, it felt very physical. I mean, she would hit my chest and say, you can't stay. You got to go back. And then she'd grab my shirt and pull me close. And she was very upset, but she was emphatic. And we literally had this conversation that if I stayed with her, our oldest son would be orphaned. I learned a lot about choice, Chris. I mean, there I was looking at the woman I loved more than life. And yet I knew I had a little boy in the backseat of that car who was going to be okay. And we made a choice. And it's so difficult to explain this. I mean, I'm doing the best I can with words I have. I mean, I'm saying she's grabbing my shirt and I'm saying she's crying. I mean, all of that felt very, very real, but the communication and the connection was almost beyond that. It was very profound. It was profound. There aren't words, but we made a choice, and I made a choice, and for whatever reason, she could not come back, but I could, and I chose to come back, if you will. It was so super sensory real. And that's what I'm trying to get at. And I don't have any concept of time in it. I don't know how long we were here. I mean, I found out later that people arrived at the scene. Spencer was seen to, professionals arrived. I had to be extricated from the car. I was then airlifted or life flighted to the nearest level 1 trauma center based on my injuries. I was unaware of any of that. I knew I'd wrecked the car. I knew half the family was gone. I had this profound experience. And it continued. I mean, here I am saying goodbye and making this choice. And what I was experiencing is our thoughts were so powerful. I didn't have to figure out, how do I go back? When I made the choice, when I decided I'm going back, I actually found myself moving about a very busy level 1 trauma center. Like here I was in spirit, if you will, wandering about, and I'm seeing the doctors and the nurses and the patients and the families of the patients. It's almost like I had this bizarre 360 view of everything that was going on. But my awareness was so keen. I mean, everyone I saw, I knew everything about them. Like they were me. There was this connection. I now call it a oneness. I mean, for instance, a nurse passed by me, totally unaware of me. And in that moment, in that split second, I knew everything about her. I knew her love, her hate, her motivations, in fact, I actually felt, and this is what was profound, I felt the abuse that she had experienced as a child, as if it were my own, but in this complete empathy, in that same moment, it's like, wow. And look at her magnificence. She's in a hospital, serving, helping, healing people. And that was true of everyone I encountered until I finally came upon this body, this man laying on a gurney that I didn't feel anything from, which I thought was odd based on this highly connected oneness I was experiencing. So I stepped closer to look, and that's when I realized that was me. That was my body. I was looking at my own body. And I think that's when the reality hit, like, wow, I'm not that. I'm more alive. I'm dead, but I'm more alive than I've ever felt in my life. And yet I knew I had to get back in, and my body was a wreck, was a mess. And that's when I realized that I could not move. I was pinned. I was struggling to breathe. There was the rancid smell of gasoline and all the glass, the broken glass. The car seat had broken apart, and he'd been ejected from the car. And my whole soul just cried out, oh. And I believe what happened is my soul or my spirit, whatever you want to call it, my consciousness, I had left my body.
Like to literally relive writing it every single day.